Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Because it's time to write now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right.
Welcome to another daily live motivation stream. I'm your host Kaufman, and today we're going to try to get some writing in. It is the end of the week, end of the work week, which means the weekend's here, and maybe, just maybe, we're going to try to see what writing we can get into. So we're going to be doing not one, not two, but 3 writing sprints. We're going to start the first one off very easy, 25 minutes. Now, if you haven't started writing today, all good. The first one's always a great way to ease into it. Maybe you just start brainstorming, you start easing yourself into whatever you're going to work on today, and then you start gaining steam, and then the later sprints tend to be good. And make sure to stick around for the breaks. We'll chat, we'll catch up, we'll hang out with all the other writers here in the community and see how our Friday is going. So with that being said, I already have my setup here. I'm ready to push right into the Scarecrow. I know yesterday, looks like I gotta screen share that. Yesterday, I wasn't able to get any real work done. I don't have quite as much admin work to do today, so we'll see. We'll see what's up. All right, my friends, ML, Tiara, Calvin, great to see all you, my friends. Very, very happy. I know we've had a good week overall. I know yesterday was the exception for me, but I felt earlier in the week I got a lot of great work in. So as you guys can see, I'm already all set on my end. Let's see what writing we can get into for the first sprint, and I am all ready. Okay, so whether you're brainstorming, writing, editing, or just working on some author branding, it's time to right now. All right. And writing sprint done. Writing sprint done. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. How did that treat you? Were you able to make any progress that time? I would love to hear. Drop a comment. Yeah, I did not. I'm working on some other admin stuff I have to take care of, but I would love to hear what were you able to get any progress on your stories at all today? Whether you got a new idea, maybe you got some words, maybe you're revising, or maybe you're planning for the next thing that you're gonna want to go write, especially with our fated fantasy fiction contest just around the corner. So very, very exciting. Eli got 306 words in. Not bad. Nice. It's like a nice little start, Eli. I'm glad that you're able to be productive. I mean, guess granted, I was productive, just not on my writing as I would like. Oof, man. Busy, busy, busy this week. ML got 200 words in. Nice. Nice, 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 my friends. So I'm glad that helped out a little bit. I'm actually on a fun chapter too. It's actually rather unfortunate. I'm a little too busy with some other things that I got going on. Yeah, it's kind of interesting because my schedule is changing. My schedule is going to be changing for a little while, so a lot more of my admin is getting pushed to later in the day. So yeah, which is all right. Life changes. But for the time being, that means that pushes my writing to later in the day. So probably what's going to happen is my writing, I'm going to end up doing a little more writing offline so that way I can keep making progress with Scarecrow without being as limited by the writing sprints. So Nice, Calvin. You got a couple hundred words. Awesome. I'm wondering how's everyone feel about the weekend? I'm actually kind of curious. Do you guys feel like you're able to get more writing in during the weekend or during the week? Is there a difference for you? I would love to hear. I think I always assume with a lot of our writers in the community that like a good portion of them, good portion of you probably have some type of full-time job or school or responsibilities during the week and then tend to have a little bit more free time on the weekends. I know that's not the case for everybody, but that seems to be an assumption that I make. So I would love to hear. Do you have more free time on the weekends for writing? I know for me, because my schedule is kind of all over the place. I know clearly I'm working on writing shenanigans every day, so it's always a mixed bag. Oh man. And you know what's interesting is I'm actually at a good part of Scarecrow too. I'm working on the first Mr. Crow full POV chapter. And as when I think about switching POVs or POV characters, I always have to ask myself, how am I going to make the style of this chapter stand out and feel different? What are all the different things that I'm going to have to do from a storytelling perspective to make it feel unique so that way it doesn't get mixed up or confused with like another POV chapter like Scarecrow or Pebble the Pixie. And when obviously in the narrative, anybody who's obviously reading through the book, they should be able to tell. But the way I look at it when we're changing characters, we always want to minimize the chance of pulling a reader out of the story. And a way that a reader can easily be pulled out is if they feel that like dialogue, actions, or things feel similar between characters and it doesn't pull them all the way into the story. A way that keeps them more engaged is making the reader feel like it is a unique character perspective that they are reading through. How do we create a unique character perspective? There are a lot of ways to do that. Things that I ask myself: dialogue. When Mr. Crow is talking and then when Scarecrow is talking, how do they sound different? If I had my eyes closed and somebody read me a random piece of dialogue from Mr. Crow and a random piece of dialogue from Scarecrow, I should be able to tell which character is speaking. For interiority, and this is if we tackle interiority with both characters. Now, obviously, Scarecrow does have a lot of interiority. With Mr. Crow, his interiority is a little bit more dispersed. And I don't know if dispersed is a little bit more fleeting because his memories are just so far gone. So Mr. Crow's interiority is very like sure and almost disruptive. So it doesn't feel like he's ever really having like a full thought, which is much more which is contrasting against Scarecrow's. Scarecrow is very introspective and trying to understand what is going on, who he is, and what's going on with the world. What else? So dialogue, interiority, and then action. Now, a lot of the things that we're going to do, obviously the action, clearly the things that Mr. Crow does is very unique from Scarecrow. And I think about it from a developmental perspective. What are the things that Scarecrow does? And then what are the things that Mr. Crow does? And when they are faced with a situation. Now, obviously, they are different character types, right? Scarecrow, Crow, obviously. But I ask myself when they're put in situations, how does their personality show and how they respond to obstacles? Scarecrow um, tends to get lost in his own head, trying to figure out how to get through the obstacle and then making a decision and usually fails or gets captured. Mr. Crow, on the other hand, is not very present. So he sees these moments and he just goes charge full force. Mr. Crow is a act now, think later, but because his mind and his memory is so disjointed, sometimes he acts now and sometimes he thinks never. I think it creates a nice contrast between the two characters, which is super fun. And then, of course, the fourth thing that really defines different character perspectives is word choice. And I think word choice is absolutely important. With the types of words you use for one character could, and this not every writer does this, but the type of words that you use with one character will change the overall feeling that the reader is experiencing with that character than with another. So I try to be very intentional with word choice as well in how am I leveraging different terminology that is more akin and makes the reader feel like they're in that character's mindset. Awesome. So that is where my head is at. I'm like super excited to actually work on it. Hopefully I can get into it this sprint. So let's up the timing a little bit. We will go. What are we at? All right. So we will go 30 minutes. I'll up that. And then if all is good, I'll do a longer sprint for the last one. So we'll go 30 minutes for our second sprint, which is awesome. Let's see, sprint number 2 out of 3, 30 minutes. Hey, what's up, Emperor? Welcome. Like, almost done with my map writing. Will resume soon enough. Yeah, writing maps are fun. I made the first map for my world, the Lands of the Last. I did that early last year, not early, late last year when I was between the first and the second draft. So Courtney, I'm having to rewrite chapter 12 and make it so you don't want to call the cops on me. an integral part of the story, Courtney. I was like, we want you want him to be a little likable at some point, right? Okay, like Mr. Crow's cognition description resembles dementia. I watched my partner, my father, and my mother go through different types of dementia. It's heartbreaking. It is. And what's interesting is the Lands of the Last Scarecrow is a world where memories have been destroyed. So it's almost like they're in a world where characters are dealing or have dealt with different forms of dementia. Um the problem is we see it in different instances, but Mr. Crow is at a very extreme. Mr. Crow's at a very extreme case with what his character has gone through. The challenge is that Mr. Crow's long term memory has basically been destroyed, and his short term memory is very, very fleeting. Both of them come through, and he's still able to retain, right? He knows that he's on a journey with Scarecrow, right? He knows that he has to help, but what he remembers goes back and forth based on how his memory was affected by the state of the world. So, yeah, absolutely. It's so heartbreaking. I personally have not known anyone myself who's dealt with dementia, but I did a research while also speaking with others who have. So, and I know that with my story, something that I really wanted to explore was the idea of memories. I really wanted to explore the idea of memories, what we do remember, what we don't remember, and how that affects different types of characters and alters or adjusts their experiences. I know that was a theme that was important to me when I was first developing the world of the Last Scarecrow. Right? So, Emperor, like that's a great question, right? If the narrator, our main character, has dementia, can you trust his telling? He becomes an unreliable narrator. Now, this is the challenge with Scarecrow, right? So, Scarecrow is, I could argue whether or not Scarecrow has dementia. Scarecrow is probably a little closer to amnesia than dementia, if I was to define it. But his is Scarecrow's a little bit of an interesting one. I can't really say too much without like really giving away story details. But Scarecrow essentially starts off as a blank slate character, and a blank slate is when a character has very little to no knowledge of their identity. So, and right, it's like technically like you're starting with the character of what they're experiencing of the world. Can you trust them? Usually you learn to trust them to their actions, but because you don't know who they are for the most part, you it's almost like a hesitant. You're like hesitantly trusting them over time. So great call outs. great cause. Kara, I work with the elderly, including people with dementia, for a cumulative of about 25 years. Wow, yeah. So you must have so much experience, Kara. That's incredible. That's incredible how much you're probably able to really help others who are dealing with such who are just dealing with those types of conditions. It's so crazy. It's different when it's someone you know. On another note, I love an unreliable narrator. Yeah, unreliable narrators are fun. And I think the reason we love unreliable narrators, not just you, Kara, but I think from what I see from readers in general, is because they have this like sense of adventure, even though like we know that they're unreliable, and as long as the author has made it clear that the character is unreliable, then we know as the reader, okay, well, the unreliable almost creates this like cool fun factor in a sense. So then they're going to go do crazy things that then we're like, oh, well, I wish I could do that. And then it creates this really interesting power dynamic, which is super cool. Awesome and perfect. So I feel pretty good on that. Let's see. So on that note, let me do a quick call out. So tomorrow's the book club. So let me call out our the Read Now book club, because that is our community event, and tomorrow's the next live stream. So tomorrow I'm gonna pull up the logo. Awesome. So for those who don't know, our April book of the month is Mythic. Let me pull this up. Here we go. So our April book of the month is Mythic. This is what we are reading as a community for the Read Now Book Club. Tomorrow is going to be our author interview. It's going to be later in the day. Let's see, 1 p.m. Pacific. No, that is the... I picked up the wrong one for some reason. Hold on. I have to grab the other one. I was like, I do not know why I picked up the wrong one. All right, here we go. So tomorrow book club is at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. So we will be chatting with author Adrian Santiago as we are talking through his book, Mythic. He had over 100 downloads in the first couple of days that we made this free for the book club. So make sure that if you haven't already, make sure to come join us. Make sure to come check it out tomorrow. We'll be interviewing him, and let's see. Yep. Let's see. Adrian Santiago writes sci-fi fantasy novels for adults. His flagship series, Mythic, promises genre-bending adventures featuring an ensemble cast of BIPOC characters. His real-life influences his fictional world with hippies doing magic, LGBTQ representation, and the spice of his Caribbean heritage, adding flavor throughout the story. So definitely make sure to come join us. The Read Now Book Club is going to be so cool. And then make sure, if you haven't already, go download the book. It's absolutely free on Amazon for the month of April. So that way you can be involved and you can come join us. Tomorrow, like you can see, is the author interview. And then at the end of the month, we will be discussing how did we feel about the book itself. We'll be talking through all the logistics. So definitely make sure to come join us for the Read Now Book Club. All right, so I feel pretty good about that. Want to do a quick advertisement, and let's get into the second writing sprint. All right, perfect. And I think I am all ready to go. So we got 30 minutes on the clock. Whether you are brainstorming, writing, editing, branding, or maybe just getting a little bit of procrastination in, this is the place to do it. Come join us because it's time to write now. writing sprint done. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. How did that treat you guys? I hope you were able to make some progress that time. I made some substantial progress, just not in my storytelling. Oh man, what are you gonna do? But I feel pretty good with what I was able to achieve on my end. I actually think I'm all ready to hop into Scarecrow now, especially with this intrigue with this crazy crow scene. Ah, so I'm all ready to get started on it. And it's interesting because it's been percolating in the back of my mind because the crow POV is very intriguing to me. And I think I know when I started on the chapter the other day or started revising it, I'm trying to think of how do I make it really stand out and really impactful, since up until this point, the reader probably feels relatively neutral ish about Crow. I mean, he started off as a minor antagonist, so the reader might have liked him for that reason. And then he's now he's like neutral dark protagonist in a sense, but he's been very kooky. So I mean, the reader might like him based off his eccentricity to this point, for much different reasons than they would be attracted to Scarecrow or the Pixie. So, and then once the reader gets through the Crow POV chapter, I want them to empathize. I want empathy for the eccentric Mr. Crow. So we'll see. We'll see. Adrian, that's interesting. Like I've been working on the world book for my series. It's still early stages, but it's looking solid. What's the world book? Is that like an encyclopedia type thing that explores like all the world building of your universe? Nice, Calvin. You got a little bit more written. Should have chapter 22 done in the next chapter. Awesome. So I'm glad I'm not the only one who's making some progress over here. So it sounds like you guys are making some good steps forward. Oh, so it looks like you guys are making some good steps forward in your own works as well, which is super cool. I know I'm kind of focused on a little bit of character development, and I'm not surprised. I mean, you guys know that feeling, right? When you guys are working on your book and then you have to do a different style of a chapter. I would actually love to hear for your books or the first book of your series, what percentage of the book is told or I guess how many POV chapters or sections are there in your books? I would actually love to hear. Like what percentage is your protagonist? Or what percentage is your main protagonist, then your supporting and your secondary characters? I would love to hear. I'm very curious. I know it's been a while since we've talked about the the POV conversation, but I'm always intrigued by what others are doing. I know for Scarecrow, I want to say that it is 75% Scarecrow's POV. He is the major as the protagonist. It's the majority of him. 75% Scarecrow POV, and then I'm trying to think of the other character. Yeah, I mean, I is that 25%? I mean, it might even be 20. It might be even be 80% Scarecrow POV, and then of the other 25%, maybe 20% potentially. I'd have to go look through it. Actually, I'm kind of curious now. Now that I think about it. Well, you guys are giving your answer. I'm actually really curious now. Specifically, how many chapters are outside of the Scarecrow POV? Okay, so I have. Let's see. I want to say a couple chapters ago, there was a dream sequence where it's technically half Scarecrow and then half the other two. So, I mean, that was like a half a chapter technically. And then we just had one Pebble and one Crow POV. And then in the chapters to come, I'll show you guys this on screen so you guys can see. And then in the chapters to come, as we're doing the Coliseum, I want to say that Coliseum of the Last is another mix, and I think the rest of these are all mixed. I go back and forth in the rest of them. So I think there's only the 2 chapters in this act where it's standalone POVs of separate characters, and then almost all of these other 4 chapters are half of them is in different POVs. So let's say if I was to add that 1, 2 chapters, 3, 4 chapters, act 3. I was like, I don't think act 3 I have any other POVs. I want to say that it's just act 4 again when we're getting close to the climax. Hmm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have roughly 5 chapters. Okay. Okay, so in Act 2, I have roughly about 4 chapters worth of other character POVs, and then Act 4, I have roughly 5 chapters worth of other character POVs. So overall, that's about 9 chapters worth of character POVs, give or take, depending on different lengths, out of a total of 56 chapters. So what percent is 9? What percent is 9 of 56? Well, technically epilogue is 56, so we'll just go 9 of 55. 16%. Okay. So that means roughly 85% of the book, the POV is Scarecrow, and then the 15% is split up between the other characters. I was really curious about that. So let's see. And what were you guys saying? So how POV for the rest of y'all? Adrian, that's super cool what you're doing for your world, by the way. I'm just saying it's like your encyclopedia, which is actually a really popular thing to do for world building as an extended, as in like an additional resource for readers to get more invested in the universe. That's very cool. Sure. Well, good luck with that. You're trying to design a ship for your science fiction. I'm not great at this. Are you trying to like come up with an image for it, or are you like thinking through it in your mind? That's interesting. Yeah, I've never had to design a ship like that before. I had to design a map last year, and that was an interesting experience for sure. You're like, are you asking me because you've been reading Shadow of the Spark and there's too many POV characters? I haven't even started yet. Oh man, this is why I have others helping me with readings. Oh man, it's once, and this is what I tell everyone, right? If there's an audiobook available, Kaufman's more likely to get through it faster. So we'll see how it goes. But that's actually funny, Adrian, that your book does have a lot of character POVs. And I think multiple POVs for books can work. I mean, Game of Thrones is a classic example of multiple POVs. The challenge every single time you add an additional character to the narrative, you have to you have to do more development and exploration to get the reader to either like or dislike the character, right? So it's definitely doable. It just the more characters, like big cast of characters, also adds more complexity as well. And unless you, as a writer, you have a skill set in writing, it can be a difficult thing to overcome successfully, of really making it feel that when a reader reads a new chapter for a new character, that character feels unique and that the characters don't feel like they blend together. I'm not saying this for you, Adrian. You've probably handled it really, really well based on the reviews and the feedback I've seen so far. So I'm actually really excited. I'm really excited, especially for our interview tomorrow. It's going to be so bomb. Calvin, you're like 2 are protagonists plus I think 4 supporting. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Let's see, Eli. In mine, it'll be pretty close to 50-50 between Zekung and Maxine. Maybe more like 60-40. But some of the Maxine stuff is another very different tone I'm experimenting with. And I mean, that can be a good thing, right? Because then it's kind of contrasting reading experiences for two separate characters. But yeah, that's really interesting. And I know two characters is actually really popular. Two character protagonist is very popular. Now, I will always argue that when there's two main character protagonists, one of them is actually the true protagonist. That's the one who the overall story is really about. But the secondary character is like very, very closely tied in. You see this with romance all the time, where it's really about two characters and the relationship building between them. But really, at heart, it's real. The story is about one of them at its core, or the world, the series. Adrian, like, I have three main characters with their own POVs. The character with the most chapters is Migdalia, so she's the MC within the ensemble. Okay. There's also B and C level characters with POV chapters, right? And you see that's a little different, right? So when we think about POV chapters and we think about protagonist main characters, actually I should probably do a video on I should probably do a video on characters. It's like, I'm gonna make a note of that. So when we think about character development, I love characters, by the way. Video on character breakdown. So when we think about characters, I like to personally split up characters into three separate categories. And for me, this makes understanding and talking through characters a little easier. I think of characters as either option A, they are a main character. They affect at least 75 to 100% of the plot of the book. Really, your protagonist probably really affects 100% of it, whether intentionally or unintentionally through the other character's actions. Let's say 75 to 100%. So your main characters affect at least 75% or more of the plot of the book. So after main characters, the secondary characters I would consider are supporting characters. Supporting characters, I would say, affect anywhere between 25 or more percent of the book. So your main characters are like your diehards, the ones that the story are about. Your supporting characters is your entire cast of characters who are really helping out your characters, right? Whether or not they show up in one chapter or multiple chapters, generally supporting characters will probably show up in more than one chapter, but the effect that they have over the major or minor plots is what makes them a supporting character. Then I like to think of my third character type as the minor character. The minor character type generally affects anywhere between around 10, 25% or less of the book. Now, usually a minor character is the type that will show up in like a single chapter. They might show up in two chapters, but usually they don't have that much of an arc, or they have one defining trait, and they're really more set. They're really more designed to help move some greater plots along. Um, any character that is like either a nameless character or they stand in and they say a few lines, I really consider an NPC, right? Gamers, non-playable character, and I don't really consider those to be real fully character development. They're kind of there to serve a specific function at a specific moment in time. So, yeah, I love talking about characters. Adrian, you said you're toning that all that down for book two, but also not at all. Interesting. Makes me even more excited too. I check it out then. Yeah, and I totally understand that. I mean, this is the same for all authors. Anybody who publishes their book, I'm telling all you guys, if you don't get an audiobook out, huge missed opportunity. It's a huge market. Of the four types, right? Paperback, ebook, hardcover, and audio. Audiobook is the fastest growing still. There is still a huge growth opportunity. Not to say that you can't do well in the other categories, but when in markets that are competitive, you want to give yourself the best advantage. And audiobooks, because that market still has a growth to the industry, you just give yourself more opportunity. And anybody could film a low quality audiobook. If you have a phone, if you have a recorder in your computer, just record the audiobook. Record over like the course of a month. It might not be high quality, and that's all right, but I would rather you have something that meets a certain level. People want to be able to hear it. And as long as you're saying, like, all right, narrated by the author, people would still buy that because people like myself prefer listening to audio. So, yeah, Adrian, it's definitely not an easy, not a long process for sure. Mm. Eli, this is actually a really great question. With my story, it makes sense logically to have two separate POVs because they're in different locations. But I'm curious why, how you chose when to change POV in yours. So, Eli, this is a great question. So I have, like I said, so I have 4 acts to the Last Scarecrow. And for those of you just hopping in, we're talking about POV chapters. So Scarecrow, like I says, 85% POV, 15% of the other characters. In Act Two, there's roughly about, I think it's roughly about 4 or so other POV ish chapters. It's really only 2 chapters that are fully other POV characters, and all of the POV changes really happens in one story arc. The reason I decided to switch POV characters is so that way it increased the tension of the storytelling as it gets closer to the midpoint. I wanted the reader who is now very familiar with Scarecrow, and maybe they're familiar with him, maybe they're getting tired, or maybe they're interested. They've now been introduced to these other side characters, Pebble the Pixie, Crow, the eccentric Mr. Crow, through through Scarecrow's POV. So I wanted the reader to experience both of these characters for very specific reasons, because of events that happen later in the book. So that way the reader feels a greater level of attachment for both characters. I wanted the reader to empathize and feel more attached to the other characters outside of Scarecrow. That was the reason I started with the POV. And then in the events leading up, like a lot of the main chapters right before the midpoint, it kind of switches back scene by scene by scene. That is because there are so many action sequences that are happening. There, it would have been impossible to do it in one POV through Scarecrow, and for it to have been for me to have done it well, because Scarecrow is a captive. If I just done his POV, it wouldn't I wouldn't have been able to explore the tension through this whole Coliseum type area. So, great question. In the end of the book, in Act 4, the reason I explore the different POVs is based off the circumstances that the characters are put into. And because the reader got a hint, intros of these characters earlier on, it increases the stakes for these characters. So, for me, the 2 reasons I predominantly do other POVs is either one, to build empathy and to build a connection with the reader and the character, or option 2, because the narrative dictates that if I did it in one POV, it wouldn't be as engaging as needing to tell it narratively over a couple POVs. So those are my two reasons. Eli, great question. Exactly. And Emperor, this is actually a really great call out. Make sure that it's obvious you've changed POV at the beginning of a chapter for yes, 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 yes. And if it's not clear to the reader, I'll show you guys here, like at the beginning, how I've made it clear for both of my characters. Let's see, before I come here. So this is how I've made it clear. So we'll go to the Pebble. I'm going to go to the Pebble POV, and I'll just show you guys the first like couple lines of it. So the Pebble POV, when I start off, I'm like, how do I know that this is a Pebble POV? Fly, you burning, sparking mother of a pixie. Pebble screeched at the top of her lungs while plummeting to her death. Last time I trust a Scarecrow, she thumped her head repeatedly. Air rushed past. Her useless wings and cloak flapped wildly in the wind above her. Dumb, wide-eyed monkeys. I think here is very, very stylistically in Pebble's POV. Pebble is very much a loudmouth, trickster of a pixie, and I think it's clear that we are in her POV. We also know from the narrative that the characters got separated, so that's also leading to that intentionality. Now, when I switch over to Crow's POV, which, like I said, I'm just starting on this part of the chapter, or I'm starting on revising this chapter. Um, and I'm still kind of playing around. I'm like, does this sound like Crow specifically? I'm saying, save the younglings, save them, save. We know from reference that anytime save the younglings is said, because I've had Crow reference it specifically, the reader knows this is a Crow thing. Since the reader knows the characters are separated, I think this is a very obvious thing for them. They're like, okay, we're probably with Mr. Crow. And then I go into his interiority here. So I completely agree with that, Emperor. If you don't find a way to clarify it, like with Pebble, I clarified it with dialogue. With Crow, I clarified through interiority. But whatever you do it, you have to have some type of strategy. Great question, Silver. Welcome to the stream, by the way. Always love seeing other writers here in the community. I'd love to hear what type of writer you are. How do I feel about the emergence of AI audiobooks? So, like everything with AI, I think doing an AI audiobook can be a great strategy because I do believe that AI can increase the efficiency of it. Now, if the biggest thing like marketing is that if I'm going to create an AI audiobook, I need to tell the potential reader who's going to buy it that it is created by AI. If I created an audiobook and I didn't disclose it was AI, readers would get really upset. If I created a book and I was like, okay, this is my audiobook, this is an AI version, I think that would build a little more confidence. Now, a lot of readers don't always like the AI because there's still a lot of distrust in AI. What I would do is I would create an AI audiobook and then I'd create my own my narrator audiobook. I think the AI for me would be like a good placeholder. Then I would also ask my readership as well, hey, would you prefer I get you an AI audiobook because I can do that faster? Or would you prefer to wait for me or for me to pay or for me to do the my self narration audiobook? Great question, Silver. Really, really great question. Yeah, exactly, Eli. Yeah, when I was talking to the POV, that's exactly. So they're like, wait, what's going on with Scarecrow? How's he going to deal with these things? Hmm. That's absolutely part of it as well. Right. So then hopping away from Scarecrow momentarily, it's also building up a little bit of hype and expectation of like, oh wait, did something bad happen to our protagonist? Hmm. And then it also will build by the time the reader gets to the end as well. So great call out. Yeah, that's funny. It's like if you focus on Bowser through the entire Mario game, when Scarecrow is captive, like he's just listening to people fight outside for several chapters. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. There's like parts of like the midpoint area that like if I just focus on Scarecrow's chapter, it just wouldn't feel like a full story. And it would feel like there's pieces missing. Mm, Lynn, that's a great call out. That's actually a really good strategy. Like I usually do who has the most to lose for the POV character determination. It's actually that's really interesting. Really interesting strategy. Or who has the most direct conflict. Yeah, I mean, I think that's also a really great strategy when trying to decide whose POV I should be following. That's really I like that. I feel like I determine my POVs based on the plot or based on maybe conflict a little bit because it's like emotional. So like because I want the reader to be more invested. So I think I focus my POVs based on character development decision or a plot decision is what it comes down to for me. And Cheryl, you might be right, right? AI might not be far enough along yet to use to create an audiobook, but I think whether it is there or it isn't, it will be at some point. So it absolutely will be. Okay, so Kaufman went on a bit of a rant. All right. By the way, if you're enjoying the stream, follow and subscribe. We're here every day with the Right Now community. We've done 467 consecutive streams. If you're looking for a daily writing community with writers of all genres and skill levels, we have our daily writing sprints. We have our specialty streams like the critique show. We have our author interview. We have the Read Now book club, and we have workshops and so much more. So make sure to tap that follow or subscribe button and you'll be alerted when we go live. All right, my friends. So on that note, let's hop into writing sprint number 3. Yes, I went on a little bit of a diatribe. So we're going to do another 30-minute sprint. And that's what's going to happen. So we're going to go 30 minutes and I will see if I can be productive. All right, and I am set on my end. Okay, perfect. So I am all set on my end. Okay, here we go. So I am all ready. So whether you are brainstorming, writing, editing, revising, author branding, or maybe just hanging out with all of us cool writers here in the community, come join us because it's time to write now. All right, my friends. So I hope you were able to get some solid progress that time. I know I was able to kind of get a start. I'm wondering how I feel about it. I'm kind of going back and forth on this crow POV. I think I like it a little bit more than I did before, but I still feel a little mixed on it. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I need to continue writing. I need not writing, revising this and see how I feel. Okay, so I was able to get some progress. I hope you were as well. Awesome, and definitely looking forward to continue to work on this chapter. Hey, what's up, Jack? Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate you. Awesome. So on that note, let's see. You said Emperor. You said my camera looks foggy. I look fine on my end, but let me pull up on my screen. I look fine on my end, but let me pull up on. Yeah, so I pulled it up on my phone. It looks fine. It might be on your end, Emperor. I'm not sure. So, on that note, let's look towards creative writing on the morrow. So, I'll be back tomorrow with our Read Now Book Club interview. We'll be back interviewing with, of course, Mr. Adrian Santiago, as we'll be talking through his process behind developing the book Mythic that we are discussing for the Read Now Book Club. So we'll be back tomorrow. It's going to be a little later in the day at 3 Pacific, 6 Eastern. We'll be here. And then Sunday will be the next episode of the Create Right Now podcast, as I'll be chatting with author J.M. Frey. And we'll be talking through fan fiction for writers, why fan fiction is important, and how J.M.'s very unique process helps really start with the writing and helps with any type of writing skill set. So that's what we got this weekend. If you enjoyed the stream, tap that like button on your way out. Help us show the algorithm that writing streams are cool. All right, my friends, thanks so much for joining us today. I really hope that we were all able to make some progress, but unfortunately, that brings us to the end of the stream. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kaufman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers.
Right now.
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 Because it's time to write.